This bill represents a historic victory for the American people. I look forward to signing it later this week. The American Rescue Plan, the partnership between Johnson & Johnson and Merck, proves we can do big things, important things in this country.
President Biden sounding some optimistic notes there today as he prepares to sign his $1.9 trillion COVID relief package into law Friday. Adding more good news today, President Biden announced the purchase of an additional 100 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine, effectively securing enough doses to vaccinate children and booster doses if the virus were to reemerge. While Biden has earned high marks from the public for his response to the crisis since taking over in January, some officials from the last guy's administration are demanding credit for the work they claim they started. Joining our conversation, Jason Johnson, journalism and politics professor at Morgan State University and a contributor to both MSNBC and The Grio. And David Plouffe is back, former Obama campaign manager and an MSNBC political analyst. Jason, thank you for filling in for me last week. I'm grateful, and I know our viewers love seeing you. I'm going to start with you. This idea, I mean, the development of the vaccine is an accomplishment, a feat of science. Everyone and anyone who contributed to their success deserves some of the credit. But I guess I'm old enough to remember that Donald Trump went upstairs, put on his jammies, plunked down in front of not even Fox News anymore. He was mad at them and did nothing as the country's president from election night until he was shuttled out of Washington, D.C. on January 20th. What kind of credit do they think they're owed?
And Nicole, you're actually giving the president some credit. If he had just gone upstairs and sat in his jammies, there would probably still be hundreds of thousands of people alive. He actually countered the value of getting vaccines. He actually countered what public health officials were trying to do. He caused some of the damage that we're facing today. In addition to, when the initial research was being done for vaccines, he wanted to pick and choose which states got access to things as simple as ventilators. So there's absolutely nobody from the previous administration who can take any sort of credit one way or another, except maybe Dr. Fauci. Even Dr. Birx has kind of said, yeah, I didn't quite do my job as well as possible. It is a bizarre attempt to rewrite history, the likes of which we haven't seen since, January 6th, for Republicans to try and take credit for what Joe Biden has clearly been doing since the moment he took office.
And, you know, David Plouffe, the polling is so extraordinary. And we've spent a career staring at polls and, in my case, willing them to say things they often didn't say. You can't will a poll number like this. 75% of the American public supports the COVID relief package. We reported in the last hour on a memo from Jen O'Malley-Dillon about it sounds like a weeks-long concerted effort on the part of the White House, the First Lady, Vice President, the Second Gentleman, and all the cabinet to really help educate the public about what's in this bill. That seems to ensure that as the benefits of the legislation make their way into people's lives, it'll be clear where it came from.
Well, there's no question, Nicole. And, you know, you and I do study a lot of polls, and anything these days that gets 75% is unusual. But usually it's things that aren't happening right in front of you. Yeah. Usually, by definition, a debate in Congress makes things split. But this has withstood it, and that's before the benefits is coming out. So I look back at 2009 when President Obama and Vice President Biden made the decision to rescue the American auto industry. If I recall, that was polling at about 15% approval. Yet by 2012, it was one of the major reasons why President Obama won re-election. So this is starting at a high water mark. And I think the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress clearly intend to narrate the benefits along the way here. So, yeah, as far as I can tell, the Republicans in Congress right now are starting fake fights about Dr. Seuss, supporting efforts to basically destroy our democracy and make it harder for everybody to vote in this country, and standing in the way of COVID relief. So, and let's not forget, a year ago, to Jason's point, Donald Trump basically said, this is going to go away. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. So there's nobody in American history who's handled a crisis more poorly than Donald Trump. It's one of the reasons he's a one-term president. So, yeah, I think those numbers are startling. And again, it just speaks to no matter what happens in Washington, in towns all across the country, people are hurting. They're hurting so badly, not just health, the economic toll this has taken. And so people desperately are saying, yes, we need the help. Not that it is a ivory tower good idea to pass a plan like this. I need the help right now.
You know, and Jason, I know people think I spend too much time trying to figure out what the Republicans are doing, but What the hell are they doing? I mean, this is not money that they're going to be able to make unpopular as time goes on. It's money that'll help get vaccines into their arms, which will help get their businesses in their districts open, that'll help get their coffers overflowing. I mean, the public will intuit, I think, and they won't need to, because it sounds like the White House is going to hit the road and make sure they understand that all of the aid that's coming is from the package. Republicans chose to obstruct that legislation and oppose it universally. What could the possible rebranding effort of standing against vaccinations and making schools safer and direct aid to families be?
So if I'm going to translate my brain into Republican speak right now, and the only way that I can imagine, I'm putting my brain into the 2022 midterms, the only way I can imagine this working is if they suggest down the road that it either wasn't enough money or that the money wasn't properly targeted. That's the only explanation. And I don't know how any of that makes any sense if we're back in movie theaters next summer for them to claim, well, the money wasn't enough or it wasn't targeted properly. And here's the thing, Nicole, and this is what we're going to see this fall. It's what we're seeing now. It's what we're going to see next summer. And remember Paul Ryan, who vehemently, he was the budget nerd, and he vehemently stood against the stimulus that Obama put through. And then everybody caught him writing letters saying, hey, can I get a piece? That's what you're going to have. You're going to have all these Republicans who voted against this bill who are going to try and go to the trough and ask for things for their district. I don't know why, logically, unless they think it could be some effective argument down the road, and I don't see what that argument is.
And, you know, I think we can predict, David Platt, that they'll argue against the size of it. The problem with that is size wasn't an issue for the last 4 years.
Of course not. So that is, again, the political argument, and the dollar amount's just about the same. The tax cuts that Trump passed with support of most Republicans in Congress, I think all of them, and this bill. So if you can't win that political argument, that on one side you're trying to help small businesses, working people, the poor, versus the very wealthy, you might as well get out of politics. Number one. Number two, I think what you're going to see a lot of them say is, oh, I actually supported the idea of it. I supported the spirit of it. In fact, I would have voted for it, but, you know, there was too much money going to California, or it was like a blue state ballot. They'll come up with their idea. And you're already seeing members of the Republican caucus today touting parts of it. I saw Roger Wicker from Mississippi sending out something about the aid to the restaurant industry. So they're going to try and basically bogart their way through this. But again, I think at the end of the day, there's too much sunlight on this. And I think not only do you need to prosecute the case if you're a Democrat about why this was a good idea and continue to do great storytelling, you need to keep reminding who stood in the other way.
Yeah. Jason and David are sticking around. With the COVID relief bill now heading to President Biden's desk, the goal of all of this, helping millions of Americans in need, and the real-world potential of $1.9 trillion is at the finish line politically, the starting line practically. In Long Beach, California, a big, diverse city where more than 51,000 people have been sickened with COVID, in the state hardest hit by the pandemic, the mayor has a plan for how to use the $151 million in federal funds the city's expecting, including millions toward economic recovery, ending city employee furloughs, and improving basic health and safety needs like food security and housing. Joining us now is Long Beach, California Mayor Robert Garcia. Last summer, Mayor Garcia lost both his mom, Gabby O'Donnell, and his stepfather, Greg O'Donnell, to COVID. I want to start there. Tonight, we're going to seek to honor the families that have lost loved ones this year and the loved ones they've lost. What is most important to you to hear about the loss?
Well, I think it's important to remember that behind every single number, there's a real story and real people. And we hear these numbers all the time about the amount of folks that have died across our country. But every single person has a story, has a family, and has impacted neighborhoods across the country. I think about my mom was an immigrant. She was an essential worker. I think like a lot of women of color who are essential workers, she didn't have a choice. She went to work because she believed in her job, but also because she had to. And losing her obviously was tragic for my family. But her story can be repeated over and over again. So people should just remember that a lot of people gave their lives and are heroes across this country that have perished to this awful virus.
My colleague Jason Johnson is here with us and has a question for you.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you've done a great job. I've actually been down to Long Beach since I've been here. I've seen some of the work that's been done. But one thing I really want to focus on is your efforts with reopening schools. Your city, because you guys have your own health department, you've been giving teachers vaccinations since January. You've been way ahead of the rest of most of the country. And opening up schools is a key economic driver. Can you talk a little bit about your city's efforts to make sure teachers are vaccinated so that schools can be reopened this spring, and what impact that might have on the city, as well as the people whose kids are finally going to be able to get back into school?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were the first health restriction to start vaccinating educators and teachers. We have nearly completed every single educator in the city, and not just K-12, but community college and university educators, independent schools as well. Every single teacher will have been vaccinated twice with the 2-week inoculation after the second vaccine when schools open up on March 29th of this month. And so we will be the first large school district in the state to open up with every single teacher and school staff member fully vaccinated. As a teacher, former teacher myself, I knew from day one that teachers deserve to be safe in the classroom, and parents deserve the peace of mind knowing that the teachers and the school staff are also safe. And so that's something that I think all school districts have been doing from day one. But we're going to have a safe reopening, and I think it's important to keep everyone safe. So it's working out really well here in Long Beach, and the whole state's moving in this direction now as well.
Texas has become the biggest state in the country to lift its mask mandate and end all COVID restrictions on businesses there. But the decision to reopen has been slammed by state and federal officials, including President Biden, who called the move, quote, Neanderthal thinking. The Lone Star State is averaging more than 5,000 new COVID cases every single day and has one of the lowest vaccination rates in the entire country. According to the New York Times, health experts worry that reopening too early could make things worse there, especially in vulnerable communities. Let's bring into our conversation NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson, live in Rio Grande City, Texas. David Pleb and Jason Johnson are still with us. I'm curious what the feeling on the ground is about it, and if people plan to still wear their masks when they're in high-risk environments like indoors and crowded places.
Well, Nicole, I will tell you, folks here in the Rio Grande Valley are not happy about the governor's decision. I've spoken to half a dozen residents here, all of whom know someone who has died from this virus. They know what it was like here during the peak when the hospitals were running out of beds and talking about possibly having to ration ventilators. And, you know, the mayor of Rio Grande City at the time said to me it was like living a nightmare, and they do not want to see that happen again. And that is what many residents and officials are afraid could happen as this mask mandate is lifted and occupancy limits are rolled back. And I spoke to several residents about how COVID has impacted them and what they think of the governor's decision. Take a listen to what some of these folks shared with me.
I believe it's premature, it is irresponsible, and consequently, it is placing the entire state of Texas in harm's way.
He's trying to put things back to normal, but I don't think we're ready for that. I don't know, in my mind, I'm still afraid, to be honest.
And I lost my grandfather like 3 weeks ago of COVID, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, are you really gonna open everything after everything that has been happening? A lot of people have been dying recently, and I'm like, are you serious? You're being that selfish?
And everyone that I've spoken to here says that they are going to continue to wear those masks. Leaders in the business community have said they intend to continue to require those of customers. And that's something that we're hearing from a lot of businesses across the state. In fact, in Austin, the city says they plan to keep their mask mandate in place. And the Austin American-Statesman is now reporting that the Texas Attorney General has threatened to sue the city over that decision if they don't reverse course by the end of today. But the other thing that you mentioned, and I want to comment on, is the vaccinations that are happening here. Texas is at the bottom of the list when you compare it to other states in terms of per capita vaccinations. And I spoke to one woman and her elderly mother who told me they got their first dose of the vaccine. It's going to be a few weeks before they get that second dose, and they really wish the governor had waited just a few more months until more people in the state were vaccinated before he rolled back those restrictions. Nicole?
Priscilla Thompson for us. Thank you so much for your reporting. We'll continue to check in with you there. I love Texas. Jason Johnson, this is so heartbreaking for the very reasons that all of the folks Priscilla talked to said. People are still scared. And in reality, the horizon is we can see it. We know how this is going to end. They just need a little more time. The politics seem irreparably broken in Texas if they can't wait.
And unnecessary, right? Again, we still have people recovering from the power outage, right? Like you have people who still don't know where they're living, who were put out of their homes, whose homes are still being repaired. Now was not necessarily the right time. But honestly, Nicole, these are the people who I fear for the most. I fear for the people who are working. I fear for the people in restaurants and at Target and H-E-B and grocery stores and everything else like that, who, because of this mandate now, or the lifting of these mandates by the governor, they're going to be dealing with more aggressive, obnoxious, anti-mask people.
Yeah.
I mentioned this. I was just in a restaurant like a couple days ago, and I saw this couple come in, walk into the restaurant without masks, and I saw 3 different waiters have to walk up to them and say, could you please politely leave? Could you please politely leave? Could you please put your mask on? That's going to be throughout the state, and those are the people getting sick. The people who are hourly employees who can't afford to get sick are the ones who get damaged when the governor decides to play politics instead of listening to science.
It's unbelievably sad. Jason Johnson, David Plouffe, thank you for being my wing people today. I'm very grateful.